So right here is a picture of Ohio, right? This is a totally normal, totally accurate picture of the state of Ohio, right? Wrong. There's actually something about this picture that is inaccurate. And I'll give you a second. Tell me in the comments, what do you think is wrong with this picture of Ohio? What about this image is wrong? You got an answer? Well, I bet you probably didn't guess that it was this border right here. You see this border right here on this image is a right angle, but in reality, it's actually a really weird looking slant. So if you look up Google Maps right now, you can see that Ohio, this border right here, has a slant, unlike the border of Minneapolis right here that has a nice straight line. Ohio's is a weird slant. It's a slant that you would never notice unless you were told about it, and then when you're told about it, you're never able to unsee this stupid little slant. Now, why on earth would a state like Ohio, everyone's favorite, least favorite state, why on earth would they have such a weird looking border? Well, it's complicated. Now, in a perfect world, this border wouldn't exist. And in a funny world, this border would exist the way it does because someone bordering Ohio would think it was funny. In reality, it exists because of war. That's right. A lot of people think that the American Civil War was the only time the U.S. went to war with itself, but it wasn't. In fact, in the years 1835 and 1836, we had something called the Toledo War, where Michigan and Ohio went to war with each other. I'm not kidding. The two U.S. states, the states of Michigan and the states of Ohio, literally went to war with each other over this area right here, called the Toledo Strip. So basically what happened, Ohio was a state early on, one of the earliest states in the Union. Michigan was a state a little bit later on, in the 1930s, 1830s or so, when Michigan decided it wanted to become a state. So when it was becoming a state and had this area up here, they needed to know where the border between Michigan and Ohio was. And so Ohio went in and calculated where they thought their border was, and Michigan thought it was wrong. So they went in and calculated where Ohio's border was, and what it came out with was this thing right here called the Toledo Strip, where basically Michigan thought the border was in a different location than Ohio thought the border was, leading to this little zone right here that was debated between Michigan and Ohio. And so how do you handle debate in a democracy? Well, you talk it out. But when that doesn't work, what do? You go to war, I guess. So in the years of 1835 to 1836, these two U.S. states straight up just went to war with each other over this area of land. And this war wasn't like that big of a deal. You've probably never heard of it because it wasn't like a huge deal. And ultimately, they fought and they fought and they fought over this time. And by fought and fought and fought, I really mean they didn't fight like that much, but they did enough for it to count as like a war. Even President Jackson got involved. But as the war ended up kind of going through, it basically ended off with them having to, the U.S. government basically choosing which state the Toledo Strip would go to. And the U.S. government ended up deciding that the Toledo Strip, this area right here, was actually the property of Ohio, which Michigan was not very happy about. And so as a consolation prize, the U.S. government decided to give Michigan, this state right here, all of its upper peninsula. This entire upper peninsula of Michigan exists because they lost this tiny little war right here over Toledo, over this tiny little strip of land right here, which actually has the city of Toledo in it. So that's why the city of Toledo is named Toledo, because it's all about the Toledo Strip right here. So yeah, Michigan literally got its entire weird like two landmass state situation. It's weird like tumor growing off of Wisconsin. It exists for the sole reason that Ohio won the Toledo War. They won the Toledo Strip, and they got this as a consolation prize. And what's interesting is that the U.S. government gave this to Michigan for a couple reasons. One, because Michigan already owned part of this. They owned this chunk here. So that was already part of the state. But second, the U.S. government just didn't think this was useful. They were like, oh, it's just this weird big forest area that doesn't matter. So let's just give it to Michigan to like shut them up. That It's so interesting that this tiny little strip of land, this Toledo strip right here, to the US government at the time in the 1830s, to the Jackson administration, was seen as valuable as the entirety of the northern peninsula of Michigan, which is insane to think about because if you actually just look at how massive it is in comparison to the tiny little Toledo strip right here, like that is just so much land. Granted, Michigan, even to this day, doesn't do like a ton with this land. They have it, but it's just kind of there. It exists to be more of like a weird trivia fact, like, hey, did you guys know that Michigan has a weird like tumor growing off of Wisconsin? Isn't that neat? And that's the kind of thing you say while you're driving over to Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is a fascinating set of cities in their own rights. But yeah, just it's so interesting that the United States literally went to war with itself over a tiny little bit of land. And because they went to war with themselves, they got this stupid slant border. Yep, this video is about the stupid slant border that looks terrible. It's one of the weirdest looking borders in the US. Maybe not the weirdest. Probably the weirdest is Delaware over here with its weird curved border up here. That like see, it's a total curve. I think one of the only curved borders in the entire world, from what I'm aware. But you know what? Delaware and its weird curved border honestly kind of deserve their own separate video outside of just talking about the Toledo Strip and the Toledo War. That absolutely ravaged the states of Ohio and Michigan. Kind of, not really. But yeah, I just think it's super interesting to look at the fact that, like, yeah, the U.S. did go to war with itself more than once. And sometimes it was in an area where it just didn't matter. And it definitely shows how states were viewed at the time. They were viewed as a lot more like these very independent governments that were within a bigger government, as opposed to now where they're basically just like a little electorate districts that have their own rules, but really they're subservient to the big guys in DC over here. And so I just think it's fascinating to like see how much the culture surrounding different states can shift over a period of time where like 150 years ago, whatever, almost 200 years ago, two states can go to war with each other over a territory dispute. Like, this is completely unheard of in a modern context, but it is very, very of its time. But yeah, don't really have a whole lot else to say. I just think it's interesting to look at Ohio, its weird border, and its weird war with Michigan. Yeah. You have anything you want to say about that? Tell it in the comments below. Are you on Team Ohio or Team Michigan? I want to know below. All right, see ya.